Hi, welcome. Today's session will be transforming Genpact's procurement and accounts payable process, leveraging the power of Celonis. I will be your host and facilitator for today's session, and I am the Global Alliances and Channels Leader for Genpact. With us, we have Sam Covell, Genpact's Chief Procurement Officer, and Donald Klunk, the VP of Finance and Corporate Controller at Genpact. In our session today, we'll cover Genpact's background in our company. We'll talk to you about our journey with Celonis and where we're headed, followed by an end with a Q&A session for the audience. A little bit over about Genpact. If you have not heard of our company, Genpact was started in 2005 and we spun out of General Electric. And as our journey, we are over 90,000 people as a global professional services firm that leverages digital technology and operations to accelerate end-to-end transformation for our clients. We have over 700 clients worldwide. We have a 69% NPS score in serving our clients, and we've delivered over 40 billion in business impact in helping back office and middle operations transform and develop into new ways of working to help our clients succeed in serving their markets. A little bit about our partnership with Celonis is it's been in over 3 years together. We have worked with Celonis in many ways to not only, as you'll hear about today, improve our own operations, but helping our clients worldwide. As you see a picture of both Alex, the CEO of Celonis, and Tiger, our CEO of Genpact, we've been spending a tremendous amount of time leveraging the power of Celonis and new ways of working and improving processes to help our clients achieve greater success in their operations. So let's get started. So Sam, can you share with us a little bit of background about your procurement organization? And then Sam will ask about the accounts payable, or Donald will ask about the accounts payable, and then we'll go into some of the problems we've been facing and where we could improve. So Sam, I'll pass over to you.
Sure. So thank you, Scott. The procurement function within Genpact has obviously been transforming continually since the start of the organization in order to keep up with the growth that's been going on as the organization, and the growth not just in terms of numbers but in terms of our geographical reach and the types of service and products that we're buying. And as a result of that, we've kind of pressed pause a couple of years ago, and we started to think about how we needed to transform and get ourselves ready for sustainable growth as we continue our growth projectile as a company, and how do we really support that growth. So as we started to think about that, data became more and more important to us. So how we were able to identify not just the spend, but also aspects of our master data management to make sure we're capturing the right data, but also understanding what happened to our processes and how things flow through the process and where we could improve them. And that for me is really the kind of the gap. Those three things have all been elevated and escalated by the accelerated by the ability to use Celonis. And I can talk a bit more about how we did that in the next slides.
Excellent. Well, thank you. Donald, can you give us a little bit of background before we dive in some more of the challenges that we've been tackling and uncovering with Celonis about your organization?
Absolutely, Scott. Thank you. So obviously very similar to Sam's comments there, you'll see our growth being, double-digit percentage growth, and it's been happening for almost every year. So as we grow, it's been, more important to try to figure out how to do things more efficiently. And we've got an aging ERP, and we thought that there was some ways that maybe we could harness data. And instead of doing it manually, which we have to do today, if there was a way to do it on a more automated and efficient basis, and that's what Celonis allows us to do. So now that we have the data, and it's a lot more efficient to get the data, we can see what's happening in the process and follow the invoice through its life cycle and determine where there are problems, inefficiencies, and wanting to do things better. So that's where we are.
That's great. So let me recap. Basically, as we've grown these organizations, there's a tremendous amount of pressure as Genpact as a whole continues to grow itself. And then we've seen, as we've looked at an aging, as you mentioned, Donald, ERP, we've got data that we might not have necessarily been able to access in the way to translate on how are we running our processes, where might there be bottlenecks, where might be there some areas of improvement. So Sam, when you first dove into this, I know we did a snapshot. We want to peel it back to see what was going on. What was it like to actually see your processes maybe in a whole different way than you thought they were really working?
Well, for us, it was, and I'm sure for most people, when you take that first look of your process maps, it's quite scary. So the first time you see all the different variations of processes and how many things aren't going down the happy path, and actually understanding some of the time constraints that happen through that process. And I think what was really interesting for us is it enabled us to identify two really key things. So the first thing was that we had issues with our data, right? So we really needed to look at our master data, and we really needed to think about how we got on top of that and do that quickly. And so that's been a big push in the first part of our implementation, is trying to do that and clean all that up. And the second thing is it gave us an initial view, an initial impetus, if you like, that we needed to do something about spend that was bypassing sourcing. And in the event, as we've worked through this, it's nowhere near as bad as that initial picture, as we've tidied up the data that support it, thankfully. But it did actually really get us focused. And so we were able to implement quite quickly after that initial view of all the data a no PO, no pay policy. We obviously had one in place before, but we weren't implementing it in the right way. And more importantly, we didn't have the data points to be able to adequately put governance around it. And that's one of the big things that Celonis has given us, is that the data and the direction in which we need to go.
Oh, that's great. It is interesting, as we serve a lot of clients. It almost sometimes, this is the power when you can drill in and drill out. It's overwhelming to see how much data you see and then to make sense of it. And really, Celonis be able to look at it from a high point of view overall to specific processes is key. And Donald, if you think about telling your story, you're a bit newer than Sam is into Genpact, and you're really transforming how we think about the AP process and the controllership as a whole. What was some of the excitement for you around how Celonis was going to help you in that journey?
The excitement goes back to Sam's comments about the data, right? And having the power of data and just being able to follow one single invoice through the entire life cycle, right? And we never had that. We never had that ability. Now that we can do that, we can drop that down to the persona-based level, right? So each individual AP analyst and everything they touch along that invoice lifecycle is incredibly powerful to have that now. Incredibly powerful.
Yeah, and the other part that not every organization has the luxury of is, the two different focus areas, which are very much linked to each other, from procurement to the payment. Leveraging the platform, collaborating together, and seeing the whole life cycle, which is, I think for us and for the overall finance function and the processes you guys have set up has been a really key. Correct. So let's talk a little bit about this. Okay, so if you think about Celonis, it's Sam, I'll take a couple headlines from you. One is, hey, you're going to start seeing data in a whole different way. And that's kind of the first step. And one of the value props that I think we discovered that we hadn't necessarily thought of was, it's a whole different way to actually understand why and where your data is maybe dirty or incorrect, and what it relates to in the process versus maybe a typical MDM of data quality. So we went through getting the system set up, et cetera. And now you have this ability to look at lots of different things. So Sam, do you want to take us a little bit through, you were talking about the Maverick spend, some of that experience, and we can walk through this life cycle that we're sharing?
Yeah, so let's talk specifically about that, because I think when we got all our data in one place, what we were very conscious of was that we had a number of processes that were outside of our ERP, and in fact were manual. And it's very hard to then to interpret the data that comes out of that. So the first thing that we had to do was understand what we could digitize in terms of those processes in order to get a proper end-to-end view. The second thing was that when in looking, which we successfully managed over the course of the last year, and then the second point is we had set up the sourcing function, and a lot of the other ways that we think about our data is managed on a category basis.
Mhm.
But the category data in our master data was shocking. It was very bad. So that had to be aligned so that we were all actually talking about the same things. And the second bit of data that was really not working for us was the level of detail that was included in some of our pieces of, whether it was the PO, whether it was the invoice, whatever. So we needed to really look at that as well. So those two pieces came together to be able, in order for us to actually really start thinking. And the other key aspect as well, I should mention, was we, as I'm sure a lot of organizations do have contracts in place that you don't, so they're negotiated, they've gone through sourcing, but they don't necessarily have a PO associated with them. They're exempt from the PO process, but they've been given exceptions, so it's still a happy path for that particular activity. And being able to make sure we had all of that reflected into our systems and the data points that we use enabled us to then really focus on the true Maverick spend, which we've been able to do.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that how was that culturally for the team? Were they, eager to go, let's dive in, fix? Were they shocking? Were they, hey, that's not my fault? What, tell me a little bit more.
Well, so I can't stress how much this has kind of really motivated our teams and Donald's team as well, because we work together very much as a joint team on this. To actually have the data and to know where to, you're actually being much more targeted on what you're trying, the issues that you're finding and the resolutions that you put in place has been really impactful. But I think as well, for me, it signals the next big shift in what happens when you actually start to implement Celonis. So the first part was all about data, and it did take quite a long time, and that's probably a reflection on the state of our master data, but it did take a long time to get that cleared up. But once we'd done that, no one was actually, the emphasis wasn't on the data, the emphasis was then on what does it tell us and how do we put the change management in place in order to be able to deliver the solution. And that for me that's where it's been really powerful for the team, is to lift yourself above that and to really focus on that solution. And so we're running now at about 1% Maverick spend, which we're super pleased about. But we're running weekly governance processes about it, where there's a whole process around that makes sure that we keep on top of it. So it's not just enough to get the data, it's not just enough to put the solution in, you then have to mobilize everybody around keeping that solution live and keep checking back to your data points to check that you are doing what you think you're doing.
Yeah, that's great. So Donald, you were lucky enough to get some of the learnings from Sam's journey as you started after. You want to share a little bit about how that's been and maybe some examples of how you're following this process and a little bit where you'd like to go?
Yeah, absolutely. Right. So when we kicked off the Celonis journey, Sam was the starting point, right, with procurement. So we're, 6 months or 7 months behind, right? So we're not quite as far along. And I'd go back again to Sam's point about the data, right? And now that we have the data, and now that we can get down to the very lowest level and look at the persona views and the dashboards that we're setting up, right? So the dashboards are across personas and across P&L line items, across geographies and regions and countries, right? So we have this glorious data set, right? And now we can focus and look and see where things are happening that aren't going down the happy path, right? And where we are, incurring more time than we should, right?
Yeah.
So we can free up people's time, right, to do more value-added things, right? And even just the process efficiency over the total life cycle of an invoice. So that's where we are. We're not quite as far along as Sam is yet, but we're catching up.
Well, and I think the other piece of being supported by your teams in my own business, getting down to one touch only, super excited looking at the predictive nature of leveraging that, of dealing with problems before they happen, especially, hey, for me in my world, we work very closely with our partners. As we would, getting paid on time is a very key, important metric for them. And this freeing up the process piece of it to make sure we're having that level of satisfaction with our partner payments is incredibly powerful for a business user, being supported by your teams as well. So yeah, we're excited. We think it's pretty neat to see where you're going with this. So let's talk a little bit about this. We've had some good results. We're getting even better at this. Sam, you gave some highlights, but that Maverick spend was that big aha moment for us, which did change some of our policies from the CFO corporate wide. You want to talk a little bit about that, and then Donald, we can talk. I know you're a little bit further along in the way that you've been thinking about it versus where we're at the technology on the AP side of what the power could be do. We'll be able to get a little bit of your thoughts too. So Sam, do you want to share some of that?
Yeah, sure. So when we kicked off our Maverick buying program, we targeted the bulk of the spend that we were expecting through our policy to go through PO. And we had an initial hump there where, we were just clearing up all the mess that was in the system. We were spending time doing quite a lot of education with people out in the business, helping them understand what the right process was for them, how they engaged, how they got the help they needed to be able to be successful in that end-to-end process. And then as we got towards the end of, Q4, we then reviewed our list of exceptions, and we decided that we were going to bring additional spend into the program. And what was really exciting for me was that we were then very quickly able to identify where we had immediate Maverick spend, so resistance in the business to the new policy. Mm-hmm. And we were able to very quickly target those people in a very collaborative and positive way and help them understand what they should be doing. And we've seen really good take up on that. So but the great thing is so as we launched that policy in January it was 10% of those, our Maverick spend went up to 10%. And then it's back down again. It's back down at about 4%, I think. So it's very quickly, you can very quickly have a look and see and say, actually, we're doing really well. We're targeting the right people. We're having the right conversations, and it's changing behavior. And I don't know how we would have managed to do that in the same amount of time if we hadn't had that information. Yeah,
it's easy for an organization to put a new policy in place, but don't realize whether it's working or not. So that's a powerful story. Donald, real quick on your end. So it's just some cycle time reductions, et cetera. You want to highlight that?
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, we are behind Sam a bit, right? Because we started a little bit later with the AP, but already, right, we are seeing the benefits of the process, right? And being able to then determine what we are doing that's delaying the process. So we have seen cycle time reduction, and it's also the burden that was on people's shoulders is being relieved somewhat. Mm-hmm. And even as it relates to just getting the data, right? So that was a manual process that took forever, right? And once you try to get data manually, then you got to try to figure out what to do with it, and right. It's an incredible burden. So that the fourth point on there, we've seen an incredible reduction of burden. Yeah. In the process.
Well, I mean, just having, everybody will say having real access to valid data and being able to manipulate and see is almost, 3/4 of the battle.
Correct.
So that's fantastic. Well, guys, I know we're getting close to the end of our segment. So I'll just ask each of you to think about, I know we're sharing right now our lessons learned and key to success, but Sam, if there was one takeaway someone that is going to think about this journey to do, what would that be? And then Donald, I'll ask the same to you. So Sam?
So my one would be, this is the kind of activity that requires everybody to be involved in. It takes a lot more breadth and depth just in terms of not the immediate team that are going to implement it, but all the things that need to happen in order to make it a success. So I think you just need to plan for that and get people excited about the prospect of how their life will get better once they've actually participated and helped you to implement.
So to say that perhaps in a different way, this is definitely a team sport. It's not an
yeah.
hero. So Donald, what would be your
I
big
think it's kind of funny. Sam stole my thunder a little bit, right? So that third bullet point on the right side, the keys to success. What's in it for me is, getting people engaged in the very early stages, getting them trained properly so they understand the tool and what it can do, and then they say, "Huh, I wonder what I can do." Right. And then, getting them excited, like Sam said, and then knowing what is the opportunity is in front of us. Right. And that's been incredibly important. And it's taken that effort right across the team and across the individuals to know what's in it for me and what I can do, what I can do better, what I can make better, what customer delight, whatever it may be, vendor delight, et cetera. Right. So that's what's been really important for us.
Well, for both of you, it's been exciting to watch, especially celebrating even at the operation level, leveraging the power of the insight instead of some organizations, first time that we've served with clients, almost misinterpreted to point out what people are doing wrong and berating them versus, hey, this is a way for all of us to do it better and serve better. So that's great. So the team and also at the individual level, the folks on the team, of the power of what that means. So on what's next for us, guys, I'll wrap this up and then we'll get into some questions. We're, as we mentioned, we're well along the path for procurement. Donald, you've done a great job being able to take some of those lessons learned and accelerate how we're deploying it with AP, and I know AR is on the horizon for accounts receivable. We are super excited about the operational apps and the EMS systems and how we're going to take advantage of them for not only predicting but executing to improve consistently. I know we like to talk about, we have a control tower, almost we use the analogy of an air traffic control tower in the plane. So we're finalizing and make sure that control tower works, and then we're going to keep working with the pilots. And because Genpact serves so many clients with expertise deeply in these process areas, what's our special sauce and accelerators we can wrap in and around that. So with that said, I know we're about out of time. I want to thank you on behalf of Sam, Donald, and myself for listening in our session. And hopefully this gives you a good foundation as you're thinking about or along your Celonis journey. And now I'll open it up to questions for the audience.